All right, come on in, everybody. Welcome back to the Holler. Justin, tnholler.com is where you can find us at the TN Holler on Twitter and Facebook. We also have all these hollers hollering all across the state thanks to your generous support. We really do appreciate it. Your small dollar monthly donations make that happen. And we also want to send a shout out to a few of our generous sponsors, one being Elisa Parker. If you're buying or selling a home in Middle Tennessee, do it through her. If you need a lawyer, aside from John Ray Clemmons, Abby Rubenfeld is very supportive. And then also, John Ray, if you're in the market for some jewelry, AJ Martin, not your grandmother's jewelry store down in Nashville on West End, is now being very supportive of us. So those people are supportive of us. So we want to shout them out when we go live here as we're doing. John Ray, how are you today, sir?
Doing all right. Yeah, a little overwhelmed. All the ill effects of this third grade retention law are hitting home. So I'm hearing from people across the state of Tennessee who are pretty ticked off.
Yeah, well, we are hearing from them also. I can only imagine what you're hearing as we get the results of these tests back. And, I want to go back and kind of talk about how we got to where we are, but let's just set the stage real quick and let people know what's happening. I'm sure if you're a parent or a teacher or a superintendent here in Tennessee, that confusion and chaos has reigned as these TCAP results are rolling in. Some of the counties are getting like more than half of their third graders have failed a portion of the TCAP test. And because of what happened with the third grade retention law that was passed a while back, that means that because of one test, these families and students are facing retention, being held back tens of thousands across the state. So, John Ray, I guess my first question to you would be, how unsurprised are you by this?
Well, I'm not surprised at all. Representative Gloria Johnson and I both warned of this exact thing when the bill was passed. And as you recall, it was rushed through during a special session of the legislature, following the whole false narrative of the GOP supermajority and Bill Lee and Penny Schwinn, talking about so-called learning loss. They wanted to call a special session and push through a bunch of this legislation, and that's what they did. I mean, this law is just yet another example of one of the inherent flaws and problems with one-party rule. This Republican governor who, as we both know, has done everything he can to destroy public education in Tennessee and steer taxpayer money to private entities and privatize the whole system. He wanted to continue this scheme of his and Schwinn's and everybody else's on that side of the aisle, and continue this learning loss false narrative. And they pushed this through in a special session, and once a GOP governor introduces something, it's basically rubber stamped by the GOP Senate and the GOP run House with little, so you get bad laws like this with little to no debate, less consideration, no thorough consideration. And it gets passed, in like a three-day time period during a special session. And that's how we've ended up with this, flaming piece of garbage.
Well, and I just want to reiterate the point that you just made, because I think it's important for people to kind of see it through Governor Lee's eyes. Like, it seems like chaos, it seems like a mess, but that's by design, because the governor's priority when he came into office, his number one priority was private school vouchers. It was steering public school funds to private schools. His number one priority has always been to hurt public schools, to squeeze public schools, and to steer funds and resources to things like privately run charter schools and private schools. His ties to Betsy DeVos can't be ignored. She has openly said that was her agenda as a Secretary of Education. And so all of these different things that we're seeing are ways to squeeze public schools and to get the headlines that we're currently seeing, which basically create the illusion that our public schools are failing. Is it too much of a conspiracy theory to say that this is by design?
Oh, it's all by design. I mean, this is a strategically crafted scheme that is being executed at the state level by Governor Bill Lee, Commissioner Penny Schwinn, and the GOP supermajority as their henchmen in the legislature. I mean, you got to remember, DeVos is the one who said there's not enough private money to carry out this privatization effort. We need taxpayer dollars. And that's exactly what they've been going after. Governor Bill Lee came in, he has never had as his priority with regard to education, improving educational outcomes for children. That has never been at the top of his priorities. His priorities with regard to education have been, how am I going to make myself more attractive to these large Republican donors on the national stage? And how can I carry out and execute this game plan of the DeVos, ilk? And so his number one priority, first year, private school vouchers, and everything that he has passed with regard to public education since, and also let's started a little bit before him under the Haslam administration. So let's not give him full credit, but he has really done more to further this scheme than anyone else. Everything he has passed has been designed, thoughtfully designed, strategically crafted to undermine confidence in our public education system, to make people across Tennessee, families, parents of students, think, well, our schools are failing. I need an alternative. I need school choice. Another, false narrative. I need, to send my kid to a private school. Man, vouchers would be nice. I need a charter school. Maybe that charter school would be nice. All this is designed to steer taxpayer money to these private entities and having the effect of draining our public school system of much needed funds, which they already receive too few. Everything. Think about it, from book bans, from the false CRT narrative to the third grade retention law. All of this has been designed to reduce confidence in our public school system and undermine teachers, all with the goal of steering more money into private hands. That's it. And nowhere in that equation did I mention improving educational outcomes for students, because we all know, the fixed costs that are going to be incurred by these, traditional public schools and all these other things. And you got to remember, we're constitutionally required to provide a free public education to students. So guess what? A whole lot of students are going to be left behind, as they continue to suck more money out of our traditional public schools. And so what you're going to have is a shell of a school building saddled with fixed costs and only a handful of students if they were to carry out their scheme. And, that's intentional to leave students behind.
So one of the things that I want to mention, we often play a clip on here of Betsy DeVos, and she says her agenda is actually to advance God's kingdom. So there is this sort of religious element to it. I don't want to dive too far into that on this conversation, but I would feel like remiss if I didn't at least point that out. And I do think Governor Lee comes at it from that angle also. One of the things that's happening right now that people are balking at is, while 60% of our kids are quote unquote failing this one test, and I want to talk about the test specifically in a little bit, simultaneously, the education department and Penny Schwinn are out there on Twitter talking about historic gains and bravo to the teachers and patting themselves on the back for these scores. What do you make of the fact that while we're seeing 60% of the state facing failure and retention, Penny Schwinn is out there taking a victory lap? What is that?
Well, it's like I said on my own Twitter account. I mean, this takes tone deaf to a whole new level. I mean, you got to be a special kind of tone deaf to be touting that. Meanwhile, you've created it complete chaos across the entire state of Tennessee among families who are now facing, because of, a single standardized test score, are now facing, their entire summers up in the air. Whether or not their child's going to go into the fourth grade is up for appeal or debate. It's completely thrown everything into chaos. And this was all by design. And, getting back to your point about DeVos and the whole religious aspect of this, I mean, where do you think Hillsdale College is coming from? I mean, this is all about, there is a reason they hand selected Hillsdale College. They want to steer children into these, schools with this cooked, half-baked curriculum of just nonsense and religious indoctrination. And also, let's not forget that there's a lot of Common Core in that curriculum as well, which the GOP professes to hate. But now here they are pushing Hillsdale College, which contains a lot of Common Core curriculum. So
Right.
they're trying to backdoor the whole thing. But yeah, I mean, Commissioner Schwinn, it's no coincidence that she's hitting the door running, and handing this off amidst the chaos. Her exit was strategically timed so that she wouldn't have to deal with the chaos that she herself helped create. And
100%.
now the question is, what's Governor Lee going to do? And I think, I would go so far as to say we need a special session to come in and end this law, repeal it, or put it off for another 5 years until this thing is ready to go. They're obviously doing this on the fly. The appeal process is basically a Word document that was created on the fly and slapped online. And then I had a friend who's also a school teacher whose child tested well in the test, in the practice test, and then got there and tested below standards on the TCAP ELA. And now they're trying to appeal because his grades are great otherwise.
Well,
But now they're being told they can't appeal to May 30th.
yeah,
So
that's the thing that we're hearing a lot of. First of all, Brian Sullivan says, "Can there be a special session?" I mean, there could be, but there won't be. But yes, that's something that should probably happen. But like you're mentioning, a lot of what we're seeing are these kids who are good students who are failing this test. And I want to show a video that we shared earlier of this is one such student who is out of Cookville, and she reads letter to Ryan Williams after failing the test, and see if you think this is a kid who can't read.
I go to Capshaw Elementary School, and I think this test is dumb, and it's really frustrating, and it's tearing apart all third graders and making them upset, and teachers upset too. I have worked so hard for the TCAP test. I've got all A's, and my teacher, Miss Williams, has made sure I was ready for fourth grade. And this test score decided by people who don't know me say I'm not prepared for fourth grade. And I'm positive I'm ready. And
I mean, that is obviously not a kid who can't read. So the people that are taking these scores to mean, 60% of our third graders can't read, that's just not true. And, we need to put that to bed right now. And then I also want to go into this test itself, because we had someone tweet at us earlier today saying, for those of you who want to take a sample test, here you go. And they sent the link to the sample test. And so I went in, John Ray, and I actually just took this test, and I passed, but I got a few wrong. And I want to show you right now some of the ones that are here that I thought were pretty complicated. And then I'll show you which ones I got wrong. Here's my score right here. I passed, John Ray, but it wasn't pretty. 19 out of 22. These are third graders, mind you. And so here's some of the questions. One was, which of the following would be best title for a paper contrasting tea and coffee? And then there's these 4 titles. My favorite teas, the history of, those are all types of drinks. Like, those are all possible answers right there. Like, what? I didn't get that one wrong, but here's one. Which should be combined into one sentence? And then there are these 2 sentences. These are hard. John Ray, these are not easy. Which sentence is not punctuated correctly? I have a dog with white. So those 4 are all actually theoretically punctuated correctly. So who's scoring the scorers here is my question. Here's another one. Not that one. Identify the correct order of sentences in this paragraph. Like, these are complicated. And by the way, there's a couple of options there. All right, so here are the ones I got wrong, apparently. Which should be combined into one sentence. Cindy left all her cosmetics at the office. Her clothing appeared rumpled and wrinkled. I guess that you couldn't throw a comma in there. I don't know. It seems like you could. And then this one, the wind has driven the cattle to find shelter. Which choice means nearly the same as the underlined verb? First of all, there's no underlined verb. And then second of all, has forced seems to be the same as has driven, but they marked it wrong. So, like, how do we even know these kids actually failed? The test is difficult. And what I would suggest, John Ray, is let's make Jeremy Faison the caucus chair of the House Republicans take this test in a timed way and see if he can pass it. And if he can't, this should be automatically repealed. What do you think?
Yeah, those questions remind me of the LSAT more than anything else. It's like, what's the most correct answer? I think was the answer on some of those. And look, that is what people need to realize is that's not a proficiency exam. The TCAP and ELA is not a proficiency test. I mean, you got to be able to read just to try to figure those questions out. But then you got to figure those questions out again, like what's the most correct answer
Right.
on some of those. I mean, this all stems. We've talked about the origins of this law and everything, but really, this is the result of when you take teachers' input and the people who are actually in the classroom with the child, when you remove them from the whole process, this is what you get. Because I sat down with a gentleman this morning out on Dickerson Road, and he told me about his daughter, straight A student. She made 2 Bs all year and didn't perform at the level necessary on the TCAP ELA because she was so stressed out about that exam. She
Right.
tested like 92% on the practice exam, and then performed poorly on that one standardized test. And now they're faced with his child who has only made 2 Bs all year, getting held back.
Crazy.
Like this makes no sense. I mean, I've got a child who reads way above his grade level, who's in 3rd grade. Fortunately, he tested, just well enough that we're not having to go through this. But he was stressed out for an entire month because, once they start talking about this, and it's hard, for teachers, as hard as they try, everybody's stressed out about this exam. They know the ramifications of this. Our children aren't oblivious to this. It creates an undue stress on these children. I mean, it just goes back. I mean, there's so many things wrong with this, from standardized testing to over testing to teaching to the test to taking teachers' input and school officials' input out of the process. The whole thing is a disaster. It was ill-conceived from the get-go. It's the reason I voted against the bill, and then pushed for the repeal or a substantive amendment this year, which never happened, obviously. It's a disaster. And again, I mean, this is what happens when you don't elect better people to office, and only elect one party to control everything. Things just get rubber stamped. Bad ideas get rubber stamped. And so when you got a governor who doesn't give 2 flying flips about educational outcomes or public education or students, and is trying to check off, a Republican or GOP playbook, this is kind of crap you end up with. And now
it seems like it's actually
chaos.
worse than that. It seems like it's actually setting them up to fail. It seems like they're actively seeking. Right. But I'm just saying, it's not that he doesn't care about the outcomes. It's like, it seems like they actually want these bad outcomes. Like, that is the goal.
Well, he doesn't care about the educational outcomes for the children. I mean, it's all designed to kill the system and create an alternative system. I mean, that's the desire here. And we need to look at this from the reality. I mean, let's look at the data and the science behind this. I mean, when you even just start to talk about, even if you included feedback from teachers, or even if you tried to design something like this and benchmark these children throughout the process, anytime you hold back a child, that has negative effects on that child's educational performance then and in the future. If you look at the data, I mean, there's a professor over at Furman who's laid out that dropout rates increase when you hold back children. And so now we're talking about holding back, 60% possibly of children across Tennessee in 3rd grade. What are the dropout rates going to be in a few years? Also, where's the funding to hire all these other extra 3rd grade teachers? And then all the extra 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, on down the line teachers, because these children are going to matriculate eventually. So you're going to have twice the class size in all future years at every level. So, I mean, this thing makes so little sense. It is a complete disaster. And that's about the only word you can say about the entire Lee administration from top to bottom is a disaster. And this is just a perfect example of how ill-conceived their policies are. And it really dots the I on their whole scheme of privatization.
Right. And I just think it's important to keep saying that this is cherry picking data, because they try to say that, okay, now 60% of our kids can't read, and they'll say it even in later grades. But just because they treat the category of approaching level as below level. And so when they frame it, if your kid is like a couple questions away or close to being able to read, they'll say, oh, they can't read. And they'll include that in the data that shows that our public schools are failing. So there's this idea out there that only 30% of Tennessee school kids can read in public schools, and that gets used to attack public schools all the time, and it's just not true. And you did warn about this. I remember when this law was being passed, others did also, almost entirely on party lines. There were actually 3 House Democrats who voted for this law. It was Towns, Thompson, and Johnny Shaw. But I just want to show this was Senator Todd Gardenhire and how little empathy he had for families that were going to eventually experience this when he was told that this exact situation was coming.
Missing a family vacation and stuff. Just a minute, Mr. Speaker, I need to shed a tear for those parents. You know, if you want to go on a family vacation and you're afraid your child might have to repeat, maybe you should spend time during the year reading to them. Maybe you ought to spend time with that child, teaching them to read instead of just letting that child do it on its own.
So, you know, John Ray, that is a pretty big slap in the face to the teachers, or to the students and the families and the parents that are experiencing what they're going through right now. What would you say to Senator Gardenhire, who basically is saying that if your student failed this standardized test, that means that you're not paying enough attention to your kid or reading to them?
Well, first of all, if I was a teacher or a parent of a student in Hamilton County or anybody in his district, I'd go beat down his door today and demand that he apologize, first of all, and do whatever it takes to repeal or substantially amend this law. I mean, you know, he's sitting there talking about whining about a summer vacation. Guess what? That's why we're not having a special session on gun violence right now, because these guys wanted to have a summer vacation. So I'm sick and tired of the nonsense and just the complete callousness of these guys across the aisle who don't get it. You know, I don't know if he had children or not. It was obviously a long time ago when his children were in school, if he had any, but he's completely out of touch. You know, we have got to do better. We have got to elect better people to office who actually have some empathy and who actually understand these issues and care about public education and the safety of our children. I mean, it's, you know, that's the kind of thing you get from these guys. When you elect, you know, these type of people to office, you're going to get bad policy again and again. And like I said, people across Tennessee who are up in arms, you don't need to blame your school board. You don't need to blame your teachers or your principals, because it's not their fault. This was done to them, not for your child. This is solely the result of the governor of Tennessee and your GOP state legislators. That's it. So that's who you need to be directing your ire towards. Call your state legislators, call the governor, and let them know how ticked off you are about this, because it's their fault. They did this to you. And that's what people need to remember.
John Ray, thanks for joining us today. Appreciate it. We'll check back with you soon. I know we have a special session coming up on another very important topic, but, you know, appreciate you coming on here and talking to us.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the opportunity. And one other thing I just want to add, I mean, I think it's important for people to remember the literacy rates in Tennessee were increasing. We were doing well, improving right up until the pandemic, and we were starting to get back to those levels. So the state of Tennessee was actually doing a good job. And there are data to show that only 10% of high school students don't read at grade level. So just because you're not necessarily at that level at third grade, when now they're going to hold you back or try to hold you back, doesn't mean you can't continue to improve your literacy rates up into high school. So all this is half baked. You know, they're using the data to carry out their own agenda. But I appreciate you shedding some light on that and allowing me to speak about it today. As you can tell, I'm pretty pissed off about it, and the people of Tennessee should be as well.
A lot of people are. Actually, one last thing. I just want you to take one pop quiz TCAP test. All right, see if you can find the verb. Jeremy Faison can't control his temper at a basketball game. All
right. Is the word pantsing in there anywhere?
All right, John Ray. Thanks for coming on here, man. Take care.
Take care. See you, buddy.
See ya. All right, that's Rep. John Ray Clemmons. Obviously fired up. The Dems put out a statement this week, and, you know, it was mostly on party lines how this passed. So, you know, he's pointing a finger at House and Senate Republicans for the chaos created by this third grade retention law, and it's absolutely accurate. They did this. Penny Schwinn spearheaded it this week. She is off at a Presidential Reagan Foundation Institute conference as chaos reigns back in her home state. She's stepping down, but she hasn't stepped down yet. We're still paying her right now. June 1st is when she finally steps down, and this is what she's going to leave in her wake. Chaos and confusion as these TCAP tests are rolling in. Over half of our state third graders, quote unquote, failed, even though so many of them are good students, straight A students that, took this test, which does not measure literacy. This is about comprehension. This is about other things, and it's not easy. I just took it, and I highly encourage you to go and take the sample test. We posted the link earlier. Feel free to message us and we'll post it again. But these questions are not simple questions. This isn't about can you read. This is difficult stuff about, certain adjectives and spelling and like with multiple answers that feel like they might work, and you can get easily confused. Which one of the following words could function as an adjective? Inspires, inspirationally, inspiration, inspirational. Those are all very similar. I have a 7-year-old daughter, and I don't know that she would easily figure that out right now, and she reads very well. This was another one. Which sentence is not punctuated correctly? I'll give you a second to look at that one, because all 4 of those are actual sentences that could work. I think it means, number 1, I have a dog with white spots as a question, but that could be a question. So again, it's not about reading. This is not just about can your kid read. This is about comprehension stuff. And I'm going to leave you with this. This is a quote from somebody who's in the education world here in Tennessee. They gave it to me anonymously, so I'm not putting their name on it, but this is from somebody who they work in education in Tennessee. And they said, the truth is test scores have been flat for 50 years since we've been using them. We've made testing companies rich. We can use benchmark tests to assess kids and help them, but what they are using them for is not what these tests were designed for. That feels very accurate. These were not designed to make or break a child's education progress. That's not what these are for. That's what they're being used for by a group of people whose sole intention is to make public schools look bad and squeeze our system to force kids to private schools and charter schools using vouchers and homeschool, because they see our public education system as a giant piggy bank to be raided. Billions of dollars are at stake. The Hillsdale heist comes to mind. This is about money and ideology, and our public schools are under attack, and this is just the latest front in that war on our public schools. Thanks so much for joining us. Follow all the hollers across the state. Keep hollering yourselves. You are the holler. Have a good day.